Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Marsh from the Greater Concord Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us for our webinar today with Reno, PA. Before we get started, I just want to let you know a few things. If you're looking for additional resources, the Chamber website is a great place for you to find links, information you may need relating to the COVID pandemic, and much more. So our website is concordnhchamber.com. So go check that out. Today there will be a Q&A session, so you can submit questions for our panelists through Zoom's Q&A portal. To access that, you will either wiggle your mouse a little bit or tap your screen and you'll see a Q&A button pop up. From there, you can just type in your question. It'll send and it will be seen by our host, that's me, and our panelists. None of the attendees will be able to see your questions. So please ask questions. We would be happy to answer them. We'll answer as many questions as we can. We will also be recording this webinar, so I will be sending it to those who registered so you can review it afterwards as well, if that's helpful for you. And then I'd just like to thank Reno for teaming up with us on this webinar and for many, many webinars that we've presented in the past. So thank you to Connie and Lindsay who will be presenting today.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Connie Lane, and I'm going to be joined by Lindsay Nato. We both are active in the nonprofit world on boards, and I've been representing nonprofits on and off for about 30 years and was an executive director of a nonprofit for a brief period of time. We will be going over the Nonprofit Emergency Relief Fund. Then I guess we can go to the first slide. And this is the agenda. We're going to go over overview of the CARES Act and an overview of what they're calling NERF, Nonprofit Emergency Relief Fund. And then I'll go over some available resources for help beyond what this webinar is. And then we'll talk about the application and related requirements, and then take your questions. So we're trying to leave about 20 to 30 minutes for the questions. So the program is a part of the money that came into New Hampshire from the CARES Act, the $1.25 billion that came in, and they've set aside $60 million for nonprofits. And based on what I learned at a couple other webinars, this approach is unique to New Hampshire and pretty forward thinking, and so hopefully it's going to work. It's going to be administered through a partnership of New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, and CD, Community Development Finance Authority. And they are implementing it under federal and state requirements. So they are administering it, they're not creating the rules. And important to remember about these funds, that is not being operated on a first come, first serve. They will get all the applications in, they will make, then they will be evaluated. They will then make some recommendations to the state, and the state, it's a horrible acronym, GOFER, will make the determination, and that stands for the Governor's Office for Emergency Relief and Recovery. So the next slide. So what can be funded, and this is in the CARES Act, is necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency caused by COVID-19. So, and they break these down into direct responses and secondary responses. The direct response is things that you spent for medical or public health needs, and then secondary response is economic support for those suffering from unemployment or business closures, and that will become more apparent as we go through this. And the timeline, what you can fund are your expenditures, what you've spent since March 1st through today, and then through the end of the year, and it's 12/30/20, and that it is not 12/31/20, but the statute says 12/30. So next slide. The program itself had three purposes. The first one was to support nonprofits that basically mitigate critical public health and economic impacts of the crisis on residents, and including reimbursement of cost interruptions caused by closures, and sustain their ability to contribute to the state's state's recovery from COVID-19 outbreak. Examples of eligible applicants include human service organizations, especially those that don't get money from some of the other Gopher allocations or other CARES Act funds. The second purpose is to support individual nonprofits that contribute to the economy, cultural and civic vitality, and to address costs by business interruptions. And examples are arts organizations. Here in Concord, that would be like CCCA, Red River, nonprofit community development corporations, community-based organizations that deliver timely information, and civic organizations that unite people across differences to find solutions. So, and then the third purpose was to support coalitions and networks or collaboratives and that speed the state's distribution of funds to meet urgent needs. So as you can see from these three purposes, it's pretty much covers all kind of nonprofits, and they've not prioritized them, and that's something that they've emphasized. So before I jump into who's eligible, who's not eligible, and how much you can apply for, I just want to make clear, Lindsay and I, we're two attorneys. We are not involved in any of the organizations that are administering this. We represent organizations that are doing applications, and really the really great resources have been made available by the groups that are administering this program. And if you go to the Gopher website, and it'll be in the materials, and go to the nonprofit page, they'll have all kinds of information. But underneath the FAQ number 28, there are two links to two webinars that they've given that are excellent. And they also did a question and answer session yesterday, and they're doing one today at 4 o'clock. And I would encourage you to go to that one. But you want to go to the next page? So the remaining webinars, the first two webinars they gave were overviews, and they're very good. And I think they're basically the same. So watch one or both of one of them would probably be what you would need. I don't think you need to watch both of them. And there's question and answer periods listed on this slide, and you can just go to these, sign up, click in, and attend. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback about this, there's an email address there that you can go into any questions about the webinars and the Q&A sessions. I think the next slide. I think an important, really critical thing that they have made available to people who are doing these applications is you can have one-on-one discussions to address either technical issues or financing issues, or how you set things up, or whether or not, how do you figure out what's an expenditure, a loss, how do you work through that? And you can sign up for these one-on-one sessions, and that's the email to do so. And they have a lot of staff, and they're making sure if they can't answer it, they will take down your information and they will get back to you. And that's the link for the Gopher site. But to be where you can find it, but to be honest, just Google in New Hampshire nonprofit emergency relief fund, and it'll pop up and you can go right to it. Might be easier than trying to type in all that. So next slide. So eligible organizations, you have to be a 501c3. They recognize that there are other types of nonprofits, but for this fund, you have to be a 501c3 operating in New Hampshire, and you don't fall into one of the many ineligible categories, which we have a couple slides about in a bit. You have to file an annual tax return. You have to file annually with the New Hampshire Charitable Trust Unit, or you're exempt from doing so under their rules. You have a non-discrimination policy. If you do not have a non-discrimination policy, there is a link on the either the FAQ or the application page that will click to samples, and you can get one adopted before you apply. And you have to be in good standing with the New Hampshire Secretary of State. So those are the basic eligibility requirements. Not eligible are nonprofit hospitals, colleges, and universities. The 501c4 and a 501c6 are types of nonprofits, but they are not being covered by this program. Organizations based outside New Hampshire, and then you guys can read through the list. Assisted living and retirement communities. You can go to the next slide. trade association. This is a whole list, and this is set out in the application and in the FAQs. The reason they've done this is a lot of these are going to be eligible through other funds, or they have decided for whatever reason from a policy standpoint that they're not going to cover them at this time. So next slide. So the process is you go through the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation's online grant portal, and the first step to accessing the application is you have to update or create an organizational profile on that grant portal. And you should do that now because you have to do that before you can apply for the grant. And you need to go in there and go ahead and get that piece done so that, and then if there's any technological issues or anything, I understand that there's an 800 number there, or you can call the Charitable Foundation and get some assistance. Next. So here's the timeline. It started on June 11th, and it's only running for 2 weeks. So that's why everybody's kind of in a frenzy trying to figure out how to do this. The deadline is 4 p.m. on June 25th. So you have to get all your application data, everything written, everything submitted, and do that by 4 p.m. on the 25th. Then they'll take it looks like June 26th to mid-July, they're saying, to make the review, look through things, and then make recommendations to the state, because the state makes the ultimate decision about who gets the grants, not the administrators. And then the next piece is in late July or into August, the state will announce the award, they'll send out notifications and begin distributing the money. So you're probably not going to see any money until mid to late August. So next slide. The overview for the application is, it's only 18 questions. The last 3 are more survey type questions, and the focus is on financial and program information. Again, it's being done through the Grant Source online application. The 2 steps, you create and update the profile, and then you complete the application. There are a lot of links in the application itself to provide you information and to give you assistance. There's a really helpful worksheet in there that I think will be very helpful when you're trying to calculate your expenses and your expenditures and your losses. And then the technological help is available again at 800. They've gone to great lengths to provide assistance and support as you work through this, recognizing that it's not an easy application, and you're also being asked to project a lot of expenditures between now and the end of the year, and things are still in flux. So you probably are going to need some help in determining how to do that. Next slide.
Connie, I think one thing to keep in mind is even if you already have a profile set up, they're asking you to go in and check and update it because the information needed for this is slightly different, probably less cumbersome than previous applications. So just do go in and check, even if you already have a profile, you'll need to re-up that.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. I'll talk about the application questions. I'm going to wait and talk about the first question last. But the financial questions are questions 2 through 9 on the application. They're asking you to basically put down the incurred expenditures that you've had since March 1st to June 30th. It's going to be a little hard to put down incurred expenses for June 30th since you're probably going to be making this before June 30th, but that was the date they picked, that were necessary to respond to COVID-19. And then the total net loss experienced as a disruption in income from March 1st to June 30th. So then you also put in your expenditures that are projected from July 1 to December 30th. The next step then is to do the net loss you project from July 1 to December 30th due to related business interruptions. The next piece, so those are, you take that's one amount, and you're going to total that amount, and from that amount, you're going to deduct any federal loans or grants that you've gotten since March 1 to reimburse any of those other expenses. For instance, if you got a PPP loan, you're going to have to show that and deduct that. You can't double dip. That's a very important policy decision at the federal level, that you cannot double dip in these programs and get salary money from PPP, and salary money from this money. So, and then you list any other pending CARES Act or other federal loans or grants you're pursuing. And how that will be handled is still a little bit unclear, but it will be handled and determined, and they'll make a policy decision consistent across all the applications. You want to go to the next one? Again, the amount requested is going to be the amount that's equal to all your actual expenditures and losses and your estimated future expenditures and losses, less any other federal emergency loans or grants received or anticipated. So you get that number. And again, there's a great a link on the application for a worksheet to help you work through this and figure out what those numbers are. And they have some categories and some suggestions for you. So the amount requested, just to be very realistic about it, you're not going to get the amount that you request, because 60 million isn't going to cover all the nonprofits in New Hampshire and the need. So be prepared to receive less than what you're asking, and set up priorities that you want in your grant, so that, for instance, if you request 30,000 to do some project and you only get 10, how are you going to make up that other amount, and why are you choosing? Because at the end of this whole process in January of next year, you're going to have to reconcile. And there's a possibility you may have to give money back if you don't spend it on what you said you were going to spend it on, or you didn't spend it. So we'll get to that in a little bit too. Okay, next. So the next are program application questions. If you've ever done a grant application, these are similar to what you put in, but they're being specifically related to COVID-19. But you need to describe your community. How's your work benefited that community? And you have to describe your track record. And as much data as you can gather, the better. Because you're going to be competing with a lot of different organizations, and you really need to have a lot of data to support your request. How has COVID-19 impacted your programs and your services and or operations? I know there's another section in the financial, but this is the chance to tell your story and to tell how it's impacted, and do it with words rather than numbers. Describe the role of your staff or your board members in financial management. Again, they're looking at some of the sophistication. Because some of your reporting requirements, you need to be pretty sophisticated and get some technology. The administrators can provide you some of that, but they will also are going to be looking at how are you going to be able to do what is required to take care of the grant at the other end of the process. They've asked you to list the primary towns and regions that you serve, and select the primary populations you serve. There's a list of primary populations in the application itself, and they ask you to select one of those. Okay, the next slide. The evaluation process is still, I think, under construction, but the applications will be first evaluated to make sure that you're truly eligible. And then if the total requests exceed available funds, they're going to have to come up with a way to determine how to allocate the money. And they will be looking at population served, community served, the record of accomplishment and impact, and the community need that's provided. Again, they are building this as they go, and I think one of the analogies in one of the webinars was they're building the runway as the airplane is landing. So they are working very diligently, but some of the issues that are coming up, they are learning to deal with them, and they're getting the application process out there now. Then they'll do the evaluation and the dissemination of the funds later. Okay, Lindsay. So I said that we were going to go to the first question last. This is the first question, and it comes down to the fact that you are going to have to sign an agreement with the state. This is like a state grant or federal grant, and if you've never done a state or federal grant, it's a lot more complicated and detail-oriented in the reporting than with some other organizations or foundations. So you're going to have to enter into agreement with the state. You should review, if you get the award, review the award carefully before signing to make sure that you can comply with all of the terms. The hope is that the agreements are going to be posted on the Gopher website before the determinations are made. That's their hope. That's what they're trying to achieve. And the other important thing is that you're going to have to probably be asked to submit a final report by January 15th of 2001. And the important takeaway is the last phrase there that I bolded: any excess that you don't use will be subject to recruitment. So, all right, Lindsay. Also, another important thing is if you get $750,000 in federal grants, that's in total. You're not going to get $750,000 from this grant, but if you get a total in a program of $750,000 grants, you're required to obtain a federal audit and to do an audit, and those can be expensive, so you just need to keep that in mind, because this grant may be what tips your balance. So in other words, if you get $680,000 right now and you get whatever the math is to get 750, you may have to meet this requirement, and you should just know that those kinds of audits are time consuming and can be expensive. Okay. These, again, the federal and state compliance, how you're going to comply with the state, how you're going to comply with federal rules and regulations is still being finalized by both the state and the administrators. You might have to become a part of the state vendor system. You might have to prove that you have no federal debarment, and there's a program that I'm not familiar with, but the federal system for award management, you may have to be a part of that as well. Again, this is other time-consuming reporting requirements and time-consuming. So if you're going to get these grants, you just need to make sure you've got the staff to help you do these reportings and to do it right and in a timely manner. I don't know if there's, Lindsay, is there anything else you want to add to those things? You looked at some of that stuff.
Yeah, just question 23 on the program's frequently asked questions sheet has a link to some helpful information about how to apply to become part of the state vendor system and the federal debarment process. So question 23 on the FAQs should help you if you're not familiar with these already.
And that's something you should probably most of your effort right now is going to be directed towards getting the application in, but not too long after that, you might want to look at what you're going to be asked to do. Okay, next. So just some practical tips from when I used to write grants, and I reached out to a couple of other executive directors who are in the process of doing this, just what they might give as practical tips. I suggested printing the application and the FAQs and reading them at least twice because there's a lot of information there. There's a lot of links there. There's a lot of really helpful things just to kind of help orient you and help you get organized about how you're going to do this. And then they said, think carefully if you should apply. You may not have the resources, and two people I spoke to are thinking about whether or not they should apply, whether this makes sense for them. As with all grant applications, data is truly important, and organize that and start getting somebody, if there's somebody in your organization that can help you start gathering that, you should start right away. Again, and organize, create a schedule, get your team. If you're lucky enough to have a team, get a team to help you set this up and submit it before the deadline. And because if we learned anything from the PPP loans, things crash. They crashed the SBA website with all the PPP applications and information, and it was not pretty. So make sure that if you can at all, submit it before the deadline. Don't try to wait till 3:30 on the 25th to submit it. And then save your work. Often somebody described that they had done a lot of work on, not on this grant, but another grant, done it all, and some technological problem happened and they lost everything and they had to start over. So those are practical tips. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Lindsay.
I would just say, remember to take a holistic approach. This is one grant funding opportunity amidst many probably that you're considering. So when you're looking at what expenses you're trying to have covered, think about whether those are covered anywhere else and prioritize for the different grants if this is one of many that you're looking at.
And I guess we're going to start taking questions, but before we do that, the FAQs and the application itself are very well done. They're covered and they're adding to them as they go. Would strongly recommend that you go through those because most questions have been answered, but there are, and if you have something really unique to your organization, make sure that you email to the email that's listed in the slides and in the FAQs. So I don't know if we have any questions, but.
I haven't seen any come in yet, but we can give folks a minute. We're happy to answer anything that might come to mind.
I just wanted to remind people that you're going to want to submit questions through that Q&A portal on Zoom. And I have a question actually for you guys. Do you have any specific advice for new organizations that maybe don't have a lot of data that they can look back on from past years? Is there any advice you can give them?
I have not heard them address that in any of their Q&As. I think it's going to be difficult if you have no data to support it. I mean, if you are up and running and you have some data, I would submit whatever you got, and again, then they'll evaluate it. But it's going to be tough for them to hand out money where it can't be supported by the data.
Yeah, and it does sound like it is pretty competitive.
Yeah, but that's a good question you should put to them and at that email address.
Are you guys receiving any questions frequently that you're having to field for people?
At the firm? No, but they are at the
yeah.
at the people who are administrating it are. It's pretty frenetic is my understanding. Yeah, my only part is helping complete an application because I'm not, I'm a board member and occasionally will be asked questions and maybe proofread stuff, but not, I don't get in, fortunately, don't have to get into the nitty gritty.
I think in nitty gritty land, a lot of people are wondering how to project what your losses are going to be, how to project what your expenditures are going to be, and how to justify that they're due to or related to COVID in some way. A lot of nonprofits this time of year, especially and into the fall, rely on annual fundraisers that they hold. And so one way to try to estimate what your losses for your annual fundraiser that you had to cancel are going to be this year is to look at, prior years and what did you average, what did you usually see, and then project that forward for this year. So it is helpful when you have that sort of data to be able to compare to back up your application information. And as Connie said, newer organizations unfortunately won't have as much of that data to rely on.
All right, well, I'm not seeing questions. We could wait a minute, but I mean, good job, guys.
Either that or they followed our advice and read all the FAQs before.
In advance, yes, that's the way to do it.
And we do have the Reno websites here. We try to keep everything updated. We have a new section with COVID updates. So as new information comes out, we'll update that. We know the chamber always stays abreast of everything as well. So those are two good resources.
Well, as we're, maybe waiting for a couple questions or wrapping up here, I want to just share some information quickly. So this is sort of a last minute announcement, but on Tuesday, the Chamber is hosting its first virtual networking event. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'd recommend you sign up for it. We've called it Business During Hours. Been to Business After Hours. It's going to be, similar to that. It will be all online, so you can join from the safety of your home. And you'll be socializing within small groups, so it will be easy to hang out with people. But then you'll rotate through different groups of people during the event. So go to our website, check that out. I'm also going to share some info here about some programs we have coming up. Let me get this on screen. Our Leadership Grader Concord program, the applications are due this Friday. So if you have not looked into that program, please do so. It's a really great opportunity to learn more about Concord. This year is going to be a really amazing year to go through that program, I think. So definitely check that out. There has been one change to the program. Instead of an overnight session to start off the year, it will be a day-long orientation session. So if that's been holding you back, there's a change there. We're also accepting nominations for our Pinnacle Awards. So this is a great way to support a business or a nonprofit or someone who's really working hard right now in the community. So definitely take a look at that and submit some nominations for us so we can celebrate these great people and organizations. That's it from me. I think we're good with questions. Thank you so much, Connie and Lindsay, for giving a great overview here and sharing that email and mentioning the session at 4 o'clock today.
Yeah, I would highly recommend you go to that session because it's very informative, and those are the real experts at this application processing. Can give you more detailed information than we can.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, everyone. Again, I've recorded this, so you'll get a copy of the video afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.